The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the white tablecloth as Jasmine Reed checked her phone for the 15th time. 2 hours. She had been sitting alone at Alinea, one of Chicago's most exclusive restaurants, for 2 hours. The server had refilled her water glass so many times she'd lost count, each approach accompanied by a look of increasing pity. Her dark fingers trembled slightly as she reached for her purse, the humiliation burning in her chest like acid. The other diners had stopped pretending not to stare. She could feel their whispered conversations, their sideways glances, their assumptions about the black woman sitting alone at a table set for 2. "Miss, perhaps you'd like to—" the server began gently. "She's not going anywhere." The voice cut through the restaurant's hushed atmosphere like a blade. Deep, accented, commanding. Jasmine looked up to see a man approaching their table, tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her semester's tuition. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, but it was his eyes that made her breath catch, intense, almost black, hand fixed on her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Without invitation, he slid into the chair across from her, his movements fluid and predatory. "He'll regret losing you," he said quietly, his Korean accent adding weight to each word. "But his loss is my gain. Welcome to Korean Mafia lovers, hey there. Please drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support makes all the difference for us to keep bringing you these emotional stories." 3 weeks earlier, Jasmine Reed had been buried in her dissertation research at the University of Chicago's Regenstein Library when her phone buzzed with a text from her roommate Maya. "Girl, you need to get out. When's the last time you went on an actual date?" Jasmine had stared at the message, her reflection caught in the dark window beside her study carrel. At 26, she was in her final year of graduate school, working toward her PhD in African American Studies, while juggling 2 part-time jobs to pay for rent and groceries. Dating felt like a luxury she couldn't afford, not just financially but emotionally. Every spare moment was devoted to her research on the Great Migration, every dollar carefully budgeted. But Maya was persistent. "There's this guy from my marketing class, Derek. He's cute, has a good job, and he specifically asked about you after seeing your picture." Against her better judgment, Jasmine had agreed. Derek seemed nice enough during their brief phone conversations. A finance professional, well-educated, claimed to appreciate intellectual women. When he suggested Alinea for their first date, Jasmine had been both flattered and terrified. She'd researched the restaurant online, her eyes widening at the prices. When she'd tried to suggest somewhere more casual, Derek had insisted. "A woman like you deserves the best," he'd said. Now sitting alone at the pristine table, Jasmine realized she should have trusted her instincts. The dress she'd bought specifically for this occasion, a simple black number that had cost her a week's grocery budget, felt like a costume. She didn't belong here among Chicago's elite, pretending to be someone she wasn't. Her phone buzzed. Finally, a message from Derek. "Sorry, something came up with work. Rain check?" That was it. No explanation, no real apology, just dismissal. Jasmine closed her eyes, fighting back tears of humiliation and rage. She'd spent money she didn't have, rearranged her entire schedule, and for what? To be treated like she was disposable. "Excuse me, miss?" The server appeared again, his expression carefully neutral. "Would you like me to bring the check for your drinks?" Before Jasmine could respond, a shadow fell across their table. She looked up to see a man standing there, not Derek, but someone entirely different. He was tall, probably in his early 30s, with the kind of presence that made the entire restaurant seem to pause. His suit was clearly custom-made, his dark hair styled with precision, and his features were unmistakably Korean. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, dark, intense, and currently fixed on her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his voice carrying a slight accent that made each word sound deliberate and important. Jasmine blinked, confused. I'm sorry, but I'm waiting for someone." The man's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "No, you're not." He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down without waiting for permission. "Your date left you here alone, didn't he?" Heat flooded Jasmine's cheeks. "How did you—" "I've been watching." His eyes never left her face. "I saw you check your phone, saw the exact moment you realized he wasn't coming, and I saw the way you held your head high despite the humiliation." Jasmine's first instinct was to leave, to escape this stranger's uncomfortably accurate observations. But something in his tone stopped her. Not pity, but something else. Respect, maybe. "I don't know who you are," she said carefully, "but this really isn't any of your business." "You're right, it isn't." He signaled the server with a subtle gesture. "But I'm making it my business." "Samuel O," he said, extending his hand across the table. "And you are?" "Confused," Jasmine replied, though she found herself shaking his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and sent an unexpected jolt through her system. "And wondering why a complete stranger is inserting himself into my evening." Samuel's smile became more genuine. "Because no woman should be left alone at a table like this. Because whoever stood you up is an idiot. And because—" He paused, studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "Because something tells me you're worth knowing." The server appeared at Samuel's elbow as if summoned by magic. "Mr. O, your usual table is ready if you'd prefer." "We'll stay here," Samuel said, without looking away from Jasmine, "and bring us the tasting menu, both of us." "Wait," Jasmine protested. "I can't afford to— You're not paying." Samuel's tone brooked no argument. "Consider it compensation for having your evening ruined by an idiot." Jasmine stared at him, trying to process what was happening. This man, Samuel, clearly had money, influence, the kind of presence that made servers appear instantly and other diners glance over with curiosity and what looked like respect, or maybe fear. "I don't accept charity," she said firmly. "Good. Neither do I." Samuel leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "This isn't charity. This is me being selfish. I want to have dinner with you, and I suspect you haven't eaten anything substantial today." He was right, and Jasmine hated that he'd noticed. She'd been too nervous about the date to eat lunch, and breakfast had been coffee and a granola bar between classes. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you want to have dinner with me? You don't know anything about me." Samuel was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes studying her face. "I know you're a graduate student at U of C. I know you work at least 2 jobs to pay your way through school. I know you spent money you probably couldn't spare on that dress because you wanted to make a good impression. I know you've been sitting here for over an hour, and instead of leaving in tears or making a scene, you held your dignity intact." His voice softened slightly. "I know you're stronger than you realize, and more beautiful than you believe." Jasmine felt her breath catch. "How could you possibly know all that?" "Because I've been watching you for 3 weeks." The admission should have terrified her. Instead, it sent a strange thrill through her chest. That's stalking." "That's interest." Samuel's expression didn't change. "You work at the campus bookstore on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. You tutor undergraduates in the library on weekends. You take the Red Line to a second job downtown, something in an office building, though I haven't determined exactly what. You live in a shared apartment in Hyde Park. You drink your coffee black because you can't afford cream, and you haven't bought yourself anything that wasn't absolutely necessary in months." Jasmine's heart was racing now, though whether from fear or something else entirely she couldn't say. "You have been stalking me." "I've been trying to figure out how to approach you," Samuel corrected. "You're not exactly accessible. Between school, work, and studying, you barely come up for air. Tonight seemed like fate." "Fate?" Jasmine laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My date abandoning me is fate. His loss creating my opportunity, yes." Samuel's eyes never wavered from hers. "Absolutely." The server appeared with wine, expensive wine that Jasmine recognized from her research into the restaurant. Samuel tasted it, nodded approval, and watched as both their glasses were filled. "I should leave," Jasmine said, though she made no move to stand. "You should stay." Samuel lifted his glass. "To second chances and better company." Despite every rational thought in her head, Jasmine found herself lifting her own glass. To confusion and curiosity. Their glasses touched with a soft chime, and Jasmine realized that whatever was happening here, whatever this strange, intense man wanted from her, Her quiet, predictable life was about to change completely. And for the first time in months, she wasn't entirely sure she minded. The tasting menu at Linnea was unlike anything Jasmine had ever experienced. Each course arrived like a small work of art, accompanied by explanations she barely understood and flavors that seemed to explode across her palate. But it wasn't the food that held her attention. It was Samuel. He ate with the same precision he seemed to apply to everything else, asking her questions between courses that revealed an intelligence that matched his obvious wealth. He knew about her research, had apparently looked up her published papers, and discussed the Great Migration with the kind of insight that suggested he'd actually read them. "Your thesis on economic displacement pattern," he said as their fourth course arrived. "It's brilliant. The way you connected historical data to contemporary gentrification trends, most academics wouldn't have made those connections." Jasmine set down her fork, studying his face. "You really read my work?" "Every paper you've published, your conference presentation from last spring, even your undergraduate thesis." Samuel's expression was matter-of-fact, as if researching her academic career was perfectly normal behavior. "You have a gift for seeing patterns others miss." "That's—" Jasmine searched for words. "That's either really flattering or really creepy." "Both, probably." Samuel's smile was self-aware. "I don't do anything halfway, Jasmine. When something interests me, I learn everything I can about it. And I interest you. You fascinate me." The intensity in his voice made her pulse quicken. "You're brilliant, beautiful, and completely unaware of your own power. You work harder than anyone I've ever met, and you do it without complaint or self-pity. You're—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You're real in a way that most people aren't." Jasmine felt heat rise in her cheeks. "You don't know me well enough to say that, don't I?" Samuel leaned forward slightly. "Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you haven't spent the last 3 years pouring everything you have into your education while working yourself to exhaustion. Tell me you don't lie awake at night wondering if it's all worth it, if you'll ever actually make it out of the cycle of struggling just to survive." The accuracy of his words hit her like a physical blow. "How? Because I recognize it." Samuel's voice softened. "I know what it looks like to fight for everything you have, to be underestimated because of where you come from or what you look like, to have to work twice as hard for half the recognition." Jasmine stared at him, seeing something in his expression that hadn't been there before, vulnerability maybe, or understanding. "What do you do, Samuel? For work, I mean." Something shifted in his face, a wall coming up so quickly she almost missed it. "I run a business, import, export, primarily dealing with Korean companies looking to establish themselves in the American market." It was a smooth answer, probably true as far as it went. But Jasmine sensed there was more to it, layers he wasn't ready to reveal. The way the restaurant staff treated him, the expensive suit, the casual way he'd ordered wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent. This wasn't just successful businessman money, this was something else entirely. "That's very vague," she said. "Most businesses are boring when you break them down to specifics." Samuel's tone was casual, but his eyes remained alert. "What about you? What happens after you finish your dissertation?" The deflection was smooth, but Jasmine caught it. Still, she found herself answering. "Teaching, hopefully. There's a position opening up at Northwestern that would be perfect, but the competition is fierce. If that doesn't work out," she shrugged, "I'll figure something out, I always do." "You shouldn't have to just figure it out." Samuel's voice carried an edge of something that might have been anger. "Someone with your intelligence, your work ethic. You should have opportunities handed to you, not have to fight for scraps." "That's not how the world works for people like me," Jasmine said quietly. "People like you. Black women from the South Side who grew up in foster care and worked their way through community college before transferring to U of C." The words came out more bitter than she'd intended. "We don't get opportunities handed to us, Samuel. We earn every single thing we get, and even then it's never enough." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Foster care," he said finally, "from age 12. Jasmine lifted her chin, daring him to pity her. "My mom died of cancer, no other family willing to take me in. I aged out at 18 with nothing but a high school diploma and a determination to make something of myself. And you have. Samuel's voice was soft but firm. Look at where you are now. PhD candidate at one of the best universities in the country, published researcher, brilliant mind that's going to change how people think about history and economics. Maybe. Jasmine picked at her food, suddenly self-conscious. If I can finish my dissertation, if I can find funding for next semester, if I can land a job that pays enough to start paying back my student loans. A lot of ifs. Story of my life. Samuel reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers where they rested beside her wine glass. The contact was brief, but it sent electricity shooting up her arm. What if I told you some of those ifs didn't have to be uncertainties? Jasmine pulled her hand back. Alarm bells going off in her head. What do you mean? I mean, I have connections, resources. I could make some calls, open some doors. No. Jasmine's voice was sharp. Absolutely not. Samuel's eyebrows rose. You haven't even heard what I'm offering. I don't need to. Jasmine set down her napkin, her body tense. I've worked too hard to get where I am to have someone swoop in and hand me things I haven't earned. I don't care how much money you have or how many connections you think you can leverage. I make my own way. Instead of looking offended, Samuel smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. There it is. There what is? The fire I've been watching for 3 weeks. The strength that got you through foster care and community college and graduate school. His eyes were warm now, admiring. You're magnificent when you're angry. Jasmine felt her resolve waver slightly. Don't try to charm me out of being mad at you. I'm not trying to charm you out of anything. I'm trying to understand you. Samuel leaned back in his chair. And I think I'm starting to. You've been fighting alone for so long you don't know how to let anyone help you. I don't need help. Everyone needs help, Jasmine. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept it when it's offered. Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it automatically, then felt her stomach drop. Derek, hey, really sorry about tonight. Maybe we can try again sometime? Samuel must have seen her expression change. Let me guess, the idiot who stood you up is having second thoughts. Jasmine stared at the message, feeling a familiar mix of anger and resignation. This was her life. Men who saw her as an option, not a priority. Men who assumed she'd be grateful for their attention whenever they decided to offer it. He wants to reschedule, she said quietly. And what do you want? Jasmine looked up at Samuel, this strange, intense man who'd appeared in her life like something out of a dream. He was watching her with those dark eyes, waiting for her answer, as if it actually mattered to him. I want. She stopped, surprised by her own honesty. I want to feel like I'm worth someone's time. Like I'm worth showing up for. Samuel's expression grew serious. You are. You're worth showing up for, worth fighting for, worth everything. He paused, his voice dropping lower. He'll regret losing you, Jasmine, but that's his problem, not yours. The words sent a shiver through her, though she couldn't say why. There was something in Samuel's tone, something that suggested he meant more than just Derek's loss. What are you really offering me, Samuel? She asked quietly. Samuel was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words. Dinner, conversation, the chance to get to know each other without the pressure of expectations or obligations. He paused. And maybe the opportunity to show you what it feels like to be someone's priority instead of their option. Jasmine felt her heart skip. It was a dangerous offer, she knew that instinctively. This man was dangerous in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. But sitting here in this beautiful restaurant, feeling more alive than she had in months, she found herself wanting to say yes. I should go home, as she said instead. I have classes tomorrow and work, and you've been taking care of everyone and everything except yourself for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to just exist in the moment. Samuel's voice was gentle but insistent. Stay, Jasmine, finish dinner with me. Let yourself have this one night. Jasmine looked at him. This mysterious man who seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls. Every rational part of her brain was screaming warnings, but her heart was whispering something else entirely. One dinner, she said finally. Samuel's smile was like sunrise. One dinner. But even as she said it, Jasmine knew she was lying to herself. This wasn't going to be just one dinner. This was the beginning of something that would change everything, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure she wanted to run from that change. 2 weeks after their dinner at Alinea, Jasmine found herself questioning every decision that had led her to this moment. Samuel had kept his word about one dinner, but somehow that single evening had evolved into coffee meetings between her classes, late-night phone conversations that lasted until dawn, and now this. Standing outside his penthouse apartment in the Gold Coast, holding a bottle of wine she couldn't afford, and wearing another dress that had decimated her budget. The building was everything she'd expected and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble lobby, doorman who'd greeted Samuel by name and her with polite curiosity. The elevator ride to the top floor had been silent, filled with tension she couldn't quite name. "You're nervous," Samuel observed as he unlocked his door. "I'm terrified," Jasmine admitted. "This is way outside my comfort zone." Samuel paused, his hand on the door handle. "We can go somewhere else. Anywhere you'd feel more comfortable." The offer was genuine, she could hear it in his voice, but Jasmine shook her head. "No. I want to see where you live. I want to understand who you are." Samuel's apartment was a study in controlled luxury. Clean lines, expensive furniture, art that probably cost more than her annual tuition, but it was the view that took her breath away. Chicago spread out below them like a glittering carpet, the lake stretching to the horizon. "It's beautiful," she breathed, moving to the windows. "It's lonely," Samuel said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "I bought this place 5 years ago thinking it would make me feel successful. Mostly it just makes me feel isolated." Jasmine glanced at him, surprised by the admission. "You could have bought anywhere. Why here?" "Because I wanted to prove I could." Samuel's reflection in the window looked tired. "Poor kid from Busan makes it big in America, buys penthouse in the most expensive neighborhood. It was supposed to mean something. And does it?" Samuel was quiet for a moment. "It did. Until I started having dinner with a brilliant woman who sees right through all the expensive trappings to what actually matters." The words sent warmth through Jasmine's chest, but also concern. "Samuel, what do you actually do? And don't give me another vague answer about import-export." Samuel moved away from the window, his posture suddenly tense. "Why does it matter?" "Because I'm starting to care about you, and I need to know what I'm getting into." Jasmine turned to face him fully. "The way people treat you, the money, the connections. This isn't just successful businessman stuff. This is something else." "You're right." Samuel poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, his movements precise but agitated. "It is something else." "Then tell me." Samuel was quiet for so long that Jasmine thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "My family has business interests. Traditional Korean businesses that sometimes require unconventional methods to protect." It wasn't a real answer, and they both knew it. But before Jasmine could press further, Samuel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor changed. His face went hard, his body tense. "I have to take this," he said, already moving toward his study. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll be right back." But he wasn't right back. Jasmine could hear his voice through the closed door, speaking rapid Korean in a tone that sounded anything but comfortable. She tried not to listen, but the conversation grew more heated, Samuel's voice rising with what sounded like anger or frustration. When he finally emerged 20 minutes later, he looked like a different person. The relaxed, charming man she'd been getting to know was gone, replaced by someone harder, more dangerous. "I'm sorry," he said, but his voice was distant. "There's a situation I need to handle." "What kind of situation?" Samuel hesitated, and Jasmine could see him weighing how much to tell her. "Business, the kind that can't wait. At 9 o'clock at night. My business doesn't keep regular hours." Samuel moved to a closet, pulling out a jacket that looked more tactical than fashionable. "I need to go." Jasmine watched him transform before her eyes, the careful businessman facade falling away to reveal something much more primal underneath. "Samuel, what's really going on?" He stopped, looking at her with an expression that was part regret, part something darker. "You should go home, Jasmine. Take my car, I'll have my driver—" "No." Jasmine's voice was firm. "I'm not leaving until you tell me what's happening. You don't understand. Then help me understand." Jasmine stepped closer to him, close enough to see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands had clenched into fists. "I told you I'm starting to care about you. That means I don't just walk away when things get complicated." Samuel stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "You have no idea what you're saying. Maybe not. But I know I'm not leaving." Samuel's phone rang again. He answered it with a sharp, "What?" Then listened, his face growing darker. "How many?" he asked in English, then switched back to Korean. When he hung up, he looked at Jasmine with something that might have been desperation. "There are people who want to hurt me, Jasmine. People who wouldn't hesitate to use you to get to me. If you stay in my life, you become a target." "What people? Why would they want to hurt you?" Samuel ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. "Because of choices I've made, things I've done to protect what's mine." "What things?" Before Samuel could answer, his phone buzzed with a text. He read it and his face went white. "Fuck." "What?" Samuel looked at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely afraid. "They know about you. Who knows about me?" Samuel was already moving, grabbing keys, checking something in a drawer that Jasmine couldn't see. "Pack whatever you need for a few days. We're leaving, now." "Samuel, you're scaring me." He stopped, turning to look at her with eyes that were suddenly blazing with an intensity that took her breath away. "Good. You should be scared, because as of right now, your life is in danger, and it's my fault." "I don't understand." "There's a war happening, Jasmine. Between families, between territories, between people who solve problems with violence instead of words." Samuel's voice was hard. "All pretense gone. And I just painted a target on your back by caring about you." Jasmine felt the world tilt around her. "Families? You mean like organized crime?" Samuel's silence was answer enough. "Oh my God." Jasmine sank onto his couch, her legs suddenly unsteady. "You're in the Mafia." "It's more complicated than that." "Are you or aren't you?" Jasmine's voice was sharp. Samuel looked at her for a long moment, and she could see him making a decision. "Yes." The simple word hung between them like a bomb. Jasmine stared at him, this man she'd been falling for, trying to reconcile the gentle, intelligent person she'd come to know with the dangerous reality he'd just revealed. "I need to go home," she said quietly. "You can't. It's not safe." "Then where am I supposed to go?" Samuel's expression softened slightly. "With me. I can protect you, but only if you stay close." Jasmine laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Protect me from what? From who?" "From people who think hurting you will hurt me." Samuel's voice was quiet but firm. "And they're right. It would." The admission hung between them, heavy with implications Jasmine wasn't ready to process. "This is insane." "I know. I should call the police." "They can't help you. Not with this." Jasmine looked at him, this beautiful, dangerous man who'd somehow become important to her in just 2 weeks. "What have you gotten me into, Samuel?" "Something I should have stayed away from." Samuel's voice was rough with regret. "But I couldn't. I tried to keep my distance, tried to just watch you from afar, but what?" Samuel looked at her with an expression that was part desperation, part something deeper. "But I fell in love with you, and now I have to figure out how to keep you alive." The words hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Love. He'd said love. "Samuel." His phone rang again, interrupting whatever she'd been about to say. This time when he answered, his voice was cold, deadly. "If you touch her, I will burn your entire operation to the ground." Jasmine felt ice form in her stomach. Someone was threatening her. Someone knew about her connection to Samuel, and they were using it as leverage. When Samuel hung up, his face was a mask of controlled fury. "We're leaving. Now." "Where are we going?" Samuel looked at her, and in his eyes she saw something that was both terrifying and oddly comforting. "Somewhere I can keep you safe while I handle this." Handle it how? Samuel's smile was sharp, predatory. The only way I know how. As they left his penthouse, Jasmine realized that her quiet, predictable life was officially over. She was in love with a Korean Mafia boss. There were people who wanted to hurt her because of it, and she was about to find out just how far Samuel O would go to protect what he considered his. The terrifying part wasn't the danger. The terrifying part was that she trusted him completely. The safe house was nothing like Jasmine had expected. Instead of some dingy hideout, Samuel had brought her to a luxury cabin in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, 2 hours from Chicago, and apparently owned by someone who owed him a favor. The place was beautiful, all stone and timber with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. But Jasmine barely noticed the scenery. She was too busy trying to process the fact that her life had become a crime thriller overnight. "How long do we have to stay here?" she asked, watching Samuel check the locks on all the doors and windows with military precision. "Until I can neutralize the threat." Samuel's voice was clipped, professional. He'd been like this since they'd left Chicago, cold, efficient, nothing like the warm, charming man she'd been falling for. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" Samuel paused in his security check, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You don't want to know." "Yes, I do." Jasmine crossed her arms. "If I'm going to be stuck here while you handle things, I deserve to know what that means. It means I'm going to have a conversation with Park Min-ho and his associates, a conversation that will make it clear that touching you is not an option." "Park Min-ho?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "Someone who thinks he can use you to get to me. Someone who's about to learn how wrong he is." There was something in Samuel's tone that made Jasmine's blood run cold. "Samuel, you're not going to—" "I'm going to do whatever is necessary to protect you." Samuel's voice was flat, final. "That's not negotiable." Jasmine stared at him, seeing a side of him she'd never witnessed before. This wasn't the gentle man who'd listened to her talk about her research, or the one who'd held her hand during their late-night phone conversations. This was someone harder, more dangerous, someone capable of things she didn't want to imagine. "I never asked you to protect me," she said quietly. "You didn't have to." Samuel finally stopped his restless movement, turning to face her fully. "The moment I decided to pursue you, I made you my responsibility." "Your responsibility?" Jasmine felt anger flare in her chest. "I'm not some object you can claim ownership of, Samuel. That's not what I meant, isn't it?" Jasmine stepped closer to him, her voice rising. "You've been watching me for weeks without my knowledge. You've inserted yourself into my life, and now you're making decisions about my safety without consulting me. How is that not treating me like property?" Samuel's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "Because property doesn't matter to me the way you do. Then why does it feel like you're trying to control me?" "Because I am." Samuel's honesty was brutal. "Because the alternative is losing you, and that's not something I'm prepared to accept." Jasmine felt her breath catch. "You can't just decide that, Samuel. You can't just—" "Can't what? Can't fall in love with you? Can't want to keep you safe? Can't be willing to do anything necessary to make sure you're protected?" Samuel's voice was rising now, his careful control starting to crack. "Because it's too late for that, Jasmine. I'm already there." "This isn't love," Jasmine shot back. "This is obsession." The words hung between them like a slap. Samuel went very still, his face going blank in a way that was somehow more frightening than his anger had been. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe what I feel for you isn't healthy or normal or what you deserve." He paused, his dark eyes boring into hers. "But it's what you have. And right now, it's the only thing standing between you and people who would hurt you without a second thought." Jasmine felt tears prick her eyes, though whether from fear or frustration or something else entirely, she couldn't say. "I didn't ask for this." "I know." Samuel's voice softened slightly. "And I'm sorry I brought this into your life, sorry I put you in danger, sorry I can't be the normal man you deserve." He paused. "But I'm not sorry I love you. Even if it is obsession, even if it's wrong, I'm not sorry." Before Jasmine could respond, Samuel's phone rang. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor shifted back to cold professionalism. "I have to take this," he said, already moving toward the door. Stay inside. Don't answer the door for anyone. Don't even go near the windows." "Samuel." But he was already gone, stepping out onto the deck to take his call. Through the glass, Jasmine could see him pacing, his voice sharp as he spoke in rapid Korean. She sank onto the leather couch, her head in her hands. 3 weeks ago, her biggest worry had been finishing her dissertation and finding funding for next semester. Now she was hiding in a safe house while the man she was falling in love with planned to do God knows what to people who wanted to hurt her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Girl, where are you? You missed our study group and you're not answering your phone." Jasmine stared at the message, realizing she couldn't even begin to explain where she was or why. How do you tell your best friend that you're in hiding because your boyfriend is in the Korean Mafia? Another text from Derek. "Hey, I know I screwed up the other night. Can we try again? I promise I'll make it up to you." The irony wasn't lost on her. 2 weeks ago, she would have been thrilled to hear from Derek, would have probably given him another chance despite his rudeness. Now the idea of going back to that simple, predictable life felt impossible. She'd tasted something else now, something dangerous and intense and completely consuming. Samuel came back inside, his face grim. "We need to leave." "What? Why?" "They found us." Samuel was already moving, grabbing the bag he'd packed for her. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they get here." Jasmine felt panic rise in her throat. "How did they find us?" "Does it matter?" Samuel's voice was sharp with urgency. "We need to go now." They were halfway to the door when the first shot shattered the front window. Samuel tackled Jasmine to the floor, his body covering hers as glass rained down around them. "Stay down," he commanded, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos. "Samuel, stay down and don't move." Samuel rolled away from her, and Jasmine saw him pull a gun from somewhere inside his jacket. The sight of the weapon in his hands should have terrified her, but instead she felt an odd sense of relief. Whatever was happening, Samuel was prepared for it. More shots came through the windows, systematic and precise. These weren't random attackers, they were professionals. "How many?" Jasmine whispered. "At least 3, maybe 4. Samuel's voice was clinical, detached. "They're trying to flush us out. What do we do?" Samuel looked at her, and for a moment, his mask slipped. She could see fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. "We survive." The shooting stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that was somehow worse than the gunfire. Samuel moved to the edge of the broken window, peering out carefully. "Samuel, oh!" a voice called from outside, accented English carrying clearly in the night air. "Send out the girl, and we'll make this quick." Samuel's grip tightened on his weapon. "Not happening," he called back. "You're outnumbered. There's nowhere to run." Samuel looked at Jasmine, and she could see him calculating, planning. "There's a back door that leads to the dock," he said quietly. "Boat keys are in the kitchen drawer. When I say go, you run. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Just run." "I'm not leaving you." "Jasmine, no." Her voice was firm despite her terror. "I'm not leaving you to die for me." Samuel stared at her, something shifting in his expression. "You could have been safe. You could have stayed away from me, lived your quiet life, finished your degree." "But I didn't." Jasmine reached for his hand, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. "I chose this. I chose you." Samuel's eyes went soft for just a moment. "Even knowing what I am, what I've done?" "Especially knowing." Jasmine squeezed his hand. "Because under all of it, you're still the man who saw me sitting alone in that restaurant and decided I was worth saving." Samuel brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. "He'll regret losing you," he said quietly, echoing his words from that first night. "But I won't make the same mistake." Before Jasmine could ask what he meant, the front door exploded inward, and Samuel O., the man she'd fallen in love with despite every rational thought in her head, rose to meet their attackers with a smile that was pure predator. The gunfight lasted less than 3 minutes, but to Jasmine, crouched behind the kitchen island while Samuel moved through the cabin like a force of nature, it felt like hours. She'd never seen violence like this. Precise, calculated, deadly. Samuel wasn't just defending them, he was hunting. When the silence finally came, it was absolute. "Jasmine," Samuel's voice was soft, careful. It's over. She looked up to see him standing in the wreckage of the living room, his shirt torn and bloodied, but alive. Whole. The relief that flooded through her was so intense it left her dizzy. "Are you hurt?" she asked, scrambling to her feet. "No." Samuel's eyes were scanning her face, her body, checking for injuries. "Are you?" "I'm fine." Jasmine looked around at the destruction. Broken glass, splintered wood, things she didn't want to identify. "Are they dead?" Samuel's voice was matter-of-fact. "All of them." Jasmine should have been horrified, should have been terrified of the man who could kill 4 people without breaking a sweat. Instead, all she felt was gratitude. He'd kept her safe. Whatever it had cost him, whatever it meant about who he was, he'd protected her. "We need to leave," Samuel said, already moving toward the back door. "More will come." "Where are we going?" Samuel paused, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Somewhere this ends. Tonight." The boat ride across Lake Geneva was silent, except for the engine and the wind. Samuel piloted them toward the Wisconsin shore, with the same deadly precision he'd shown during the fight, his face set in hard lines. Jasmine wanted to ask questions, wanted to understand what came next, but something in his demeanor warned her to wait. They docked at a private pier where a car was waiting. Another favor called in, another piece of Samuel's carefully constructed network. As they drove back toward Chicago, Jasmine finally broke the silence. "What happens now?" "Now I finish this." Samuel's voice was cold, distant. "I should have handled Park Min-ho weeks ago before he knew about you. That was my mistake." "Handle him how?" Samuel glanced at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her stomach clench. "The only way that ensures your safety." "Samuel, he crossed a line tonight, Jasmine. He brought you into this, put you in danger, tried to use you as leverage against me." Samuel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "That's not something I can forgive. So you're going to kill him." It wasn't a question. Samuel's silence was answer enough. "And then what?" Jasmine asked. "What happens to us?" Samuel was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been regret. "Then you go back to your life, your real life, school, research, the future you've worked so hard for." "What if I don't want that?" Samuel's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide with surprise. What if I don't want to go back?" Jasmine's voice was steady, sure. "What if I want to stay with you?" "Jasmine, you don't understand what you're saying. My life, my world, it's not safe, it's not normal. You could never have the things you deserve." "What things?" "A quiet life, stability, a man who comes home every night without blood on his hands." Samuel's voice was bitter. "Children you don't have to worry about protecting from their father's enemies." "What if I don't want quiet?" Jasmine turned in her seat to face him fully. "What if I want you exactly as you are, dangerous world and all?" Samuel pulled the car over so abruptly that Jasmine's seatbelt locked. He turned to stare at her, his face a mix of hope and disbelief. "You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life." Jasmine reached for his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Samuel, 3 weeks ago I was sleepwalking through my life. Working, studying, existing, but not really living. Then you walked into that restaurant and everything changed. I put you in danger. You woke me up." Jasmine's voice was fierce. "You made me feel alive, made me feel like I mattered, like I was worth fighting for. Do you think I want to go back to feeling invisible after that?" Samuel stared at her, his dark eyes searching her face. "You could die, Jasmine. Being with me, being part of my world, people will always try to use you to get to me. Then we'll handle them. Together. Together." Samuel repeated the word like he was testing how it sounded. "You want to be part of this, really part of it." "I want to be part of you." Jasmine brought his hand to her lips, pressing a soft kiss to his knuckles. "All of you. The businessman, the protector, the dangerous man who kills to keep me safe. I want all of it." Samuel's control finally cracked. He pulled her across the center console, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was desperate, claiming full of all the words they hadn't said. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I love you." Samuel said against her lips. God help me, I love you more than my own life. I love you too. Jasmine's voice was soft but certain. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Samuel pulled back to look at her, his eyes blazing with an intensity that took her breath away. Together, he agreed. But first I have a promise to keep. They drove the rest of the way to Chicago in comfortable silence, Jasmine's hand in Samuel's, both of them understanding that they'd crossed a line tonight that there was no coming back from. She wasn't just accepting his world, she was choosing to be part of it. The warehouse in Chinatown was exactly what Jasmine had expected from a final confrontation. Dark, isolated, filled with shadows and the kind of atmosphere that promised violence. Samuel parked outside and turned to her. "Stay in the car," he said. "This won't take long." "Samuel, please." His voice was soft but firm. "Let me handle this. Let me protect you." Jasmine nodded, understanding that this was something he needed to do alone. "Be careful." Samuel's smile was sharp, predatory. "I'm not the one who needs to be careful tonight." She watched him walk into the warehouse, this beautiful, dangerous man she'd fallen in love with, and realized she wasn't afraid. Whatever happened in there, whatever Samuel had to do to end this threat, she would accept it. Because this was who he was and she'd chosen him completely. 20 minutes later, Samuel emerged alone. His clothes were pristine, his expression calm, but there was something in his eyes that told her everything she needed to know. It was over. "Is he?" she asked, as Samuel got back in the car. "He won't be threatening you again," Samuel said simply. "No one will." As they drove away from the warehouse, Jasmine felt a strange sense of peace settle over her. Her old life was gone, burned away in gunfire and blood and declarations of love, but the new life stretching out before her, dangerous, unpredictable, but filled with a love so intense it took her breath away, felt like exactly where she belonged. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Samuel glanced at her, his expression soft with something that might have been wonder. "Now we go home, and tomorrow, we start building a life together. Your penthouse? Our penthouse." Samuel's smile was warm, real. "If you want it." Jasmine thought about her tiny shared apartment, her careful budget, her quiet, predictable life. Then she looked at Samuel, her Samuel who'd killed for her tonight, who'd offered her a world she'd never dreamed of. "I want it," she said. "I want all of it." Samuel brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her palm. "Then it's yours. Everything I have, everything I am, it's yours." As they drove through the Chicago night toward their new life together, Jasmine realized that Derek had been right about one thing. She did deserve the best. She just hadn't known what the best looked like until a Korean Mafia boss had walked into her life and shown her what it meant to be someone's everything. Years later, Jasmine would look back on that night as the moment her real life began. The moment she stopped being afraid of wanting more, of taking up space, of believing she deserved love that was fierce and protective and completely consuming. The penthouse had become their sanctuary, filled with her books and his art, her research and his business calls in rapid Korean. She'd finished her dissertation, with Samuel's quiet support and connections opening doors she'd never dreamed of, and landed the position at Northwestern. But more than that, she'd found her place in Samuel's world. The other families had accepted her eventually, recognizing that Samuel O's woman was not to be underestimated or threatened. She'd learned to navigate the complex politics of his business, to read the subtle signs that meant danger, to trust in Samuel's ability to protect what was his. And she was his, completely and utterly, just as he was hers. "Mrs. Oh," Samuel's voice came from the doorway, warm with affection and something deeper. "Your students called. They want to know if you're available for office hours tomorrow." Jasmine looked up from her laptop where she'd been grading papers, smiling at the sight of her husband. 3 years of marriage hadn't dimmed the intensity between them. If anything, it had only grown stronger. "Professor O has a nice ring to it," she said, rising to meet him, "though I still can't believe Northwestern created an entire endowed chair just for me." Samuel's smile was mysterious. Talented professors are hard to find. They wanted to make sure they kept you. "Samuel," Jasmine's voice carried a warning. "Please tell me you didn't." "I didn't do anything illegal," Samuel said, pulling her into his arms. "I may have made a very generous donation to their African American Studies department, completely above board." Jasmine shook her head, but she was smiling. This was her life now, a man who moved mountains for her without her even asking, who used his considerable influence to make her dreams come true. "I love you," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "My dangerous, impossible, wonderful husband." "I love you too," Samuel replied, his voice soft with wonder, as if he still couldn't quite believe she was his. "My brilliant, beautiful, brave wife." As he kissed her, Jasmine thought about that night in the restaurant, sitting alone and humiliated, thinking her life was falling apart. She'd had no idea that the best thing that would ever happen to her was about to walk through the door and change everything. Derek had been wrong about a lot of things, but Samuel had been right about one. He would regret losing her, but his loss had become Samuel's gain and Jasmine's salvation, and she wouldn't change a single moment of the dangerous, beautiful life they'd built together.